The U.S. military has announced that the latest DPRK missile, the Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile, is capable of striking any target in the United States, and this has a lot of U.S. military officials worried. The U.S. Forces Korea said in its official assessment of the long-range missile with an estimated range of 12,874 kilometers, or 8,000 miles, the Hwasong-15 is well capable of reaching the continental United States. Now, this does come after there have been 3 high-profile meetings between U.S. President Donald Trump and DPRK Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. Now, the two have met 3 times in the last year to discuss the possibility of denuclearizing the DPRK and then receiving sanctions relief from the devastating sanctions that have been put on the country, even removing all of them entirely. While the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered the dismantlement of a missile test site as well as a highly publicized destruction of a nuclear testing facility at the Pyongyang, much work remains to move toward the eventual goal of a final, fully verified denuclearization. The DPRK successfully test-fired a Hwasong-15 missile last year and described it as the first missile capable of putting the whole U.S. within its range. The country has 2 other types of ICBMs, the Hwasong-13, which can fly as far as 5,500 kilometers, and the Hwasong-14 with an estimated range of 12,874 kilometers, which is capable of reaching most of the continental United States. Now, it should be noted that this development in intercontinental ballistic missile technology comes as the United States has singularly failed to give any sanctions relief to the DPRK in exchange for the measures that the North has already taken. Now, the United States has a very long history of not living up to its obligations, particularly with regards to the DPRK in the past, signing certain agreements for denuclearization, etc., then not carrying them out, and then the North returning to the nuclearization of the country, and then the U.S. claiming that the DPRK is not living up to its obligations. So what we're seeing here is very much the same pattern that we have seen with regards to the U.S. to the DPRK since basically the beginning of the hostilities between the two countries. The U.S. claims it is going to do something, then doesn't do it, and then points the finger at the DPRK. But this is signaling something very significant. The DPRK is capable of striking the U.S. mainland with ballistic missile technology, which would not require very much modification to make these nuclear weapons that could cause a great deal of damage. What we have now is an even greater deterrent against U.S. invasion. So what we have in this situation is even more incentive to return to the bargaining table, release the DPRK from the unjust sanctions that have been placed against it, and then everything can proceed peacefully. But this is not something the U.S. wants. This is something that is an affront to them. That means the last couple decades of trying to destroy the country, they have to admit that they failed. And it didn't work. And that the sanctions that they've been putting on them for decades also didn't work. The DPRK is going to chart its own course, its own independence from any kind of imperialist power, and that's what the United States cannot stand. Despite all of its efforts after all these decades, they failed. Their foreign policy was a failure. The needless suffering of DPRK people as a result of these sanctions was all for nothing. Not that the United States actually cares about the suffering of people around the world, but you get my point. So in other words, the U.S. has to eventually admit that they've lost. They are not going to force the DPRK into anything, and that maybe it's about time that they just accept that they've lost and leave the DPRK alone. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.